Hello and welcome to another somewhat exciting, that's the first lie of the day, episode of Psychthoughts. I'm Derek Edwards and I'm joined by my best friend and colleague. His name is Doug. Say hello, Doug.
Hello, Doug. It's good to see you, Derek.
I've missed seeing you in person, but I feel so connected to your square right now. This is the closest our squares have been on my screen in a long time. So,
sometimes I always feel like I want to go, I'll take Elaine for the block.
If you've been watching Psych Thoughts at all, you know that we need an intern to keep us on track and then to yell at us when we go a little bit over time. And her name's Elaine. Hello, Elaine.
Hello, how are you?
Well, we're doing well. Do you have anything witty to say?
Nope.
Okay. We're going to start a GoFundMe page for Elaine so that she can get something witty to say. I don't know how much money she'll need to have something witty, so just keep contributing and we'll let you know when that happens. If you watch Psych Thoughts at all, you've probably seen our very special guest, who's probably not a guest any longer, more like a regular Psych Thoughts, one of the new co-hosts of Psych Thoughts, Dr. Nicole Henniger. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Again, we wish you had something more going on. But we're so glad you don't.
I should be leaving for Europe, this week.
How's that working?
Oh, it's fine. No, actually, I'm throwing myself into gardening now because we moved to a new place in February and I've never not rented. And so it's really different owning now. Like, I want to put plants in everywhere, but I don't know how to grow anything. So I'm like Googling every plant I buy, like, how do I make this not die? It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also
I
need
kill a lot
to
of plants.
Certain plants by other plants and not by certain plants. And
it's really complex.
It is.
I tried to grow blueberries, not just like a blueberry. I'm aware of how blueberries happen, by the way, but I go to the nursery and the guy at the nursery, he says, you need to find a male and a female blueberry bush. And so I'm like turning them over and looking at the root balls. And I'm like, I don't know. I ended up buying two, but I don't think they were compatible. They didn't get selected on eHarmony. So we had one blueberry, and it was gone. So now we don't have a bush anymore.
Oh, man. That is something
I struggle growing anything garden-wise. Now, if you need hay or cows, I got you. Anything else, I'm kind of over it.
Well, I built a little herb garden just this week, and I got it set up. It's really nice. You should see. I got pictures. I'll send them to you. And then after I get everything planted in, Lisa goes through and reads everything. These plants don't need to be next to each other. This needs to be watered all the time. This never needs to be watered. I'm like, great. I spent all that money for nothing.
Yes. We had an herb garden last year and we killed mint. Like, it's a weed.
And that should be a sign about your garden.
Yeah, so I'll keep you updated this year, but everything looks happy for now. I mean, it's been like a week, so.
Well,
what I'm hearing you say is we're probably going to want to make sure we have a grocery run in our future. Like, probably don't depend on your garden for sustenance. Is that accurate?
Probably not. Nope.
that works. Again, thank you for joining us on Psych Thoughts. That's it for today. No, that would have been something. You can subscribe to our channel. We have some subscribers. That's pretty exciting. There's a button in this area. Click it. And then you can share our videos for people. And as we say every week, we don't mind being the fruitcake of your videos. So send us to people you don't like. We can be a drinking game. We're a number of different things. It doesn't matter what you want to be. Psych Thoughts is here just for you. Today's episode, we're going to talk about how to be happy. And that'll be fun. Everybody feeling happy?
Well, I feel, what was the word?
Eudaimonia.
Yeah, eudaimonia. You're going to learn a word that's on the final that the professor can't pronounce, so we'll see how that works. And that's kind of like a faculty behind the mask,
Right.
when we're Googling a word before a class and we We
leaping
teach it
through
with
the
such
textbook.
confidence. Yeah, absolutely. We all know eudaimonia, right? I mean, the obvious.
I've discovered that
because
if you just say stuff and you act like you know what you're saying, most people will kind of go, okay.
Confidence.
So happiness is an interesting topic in psychology, and I like to talk about this, especially when I used to teach general psychology, because when we started studying happiness, we see this shift in psychology from studying when people were broken to now studying when people are flourishing. So what might be the positive psychology movement later really got its roots from humanistic psychology, which took the place of psychoanalysis or the personality studies that we know of when we talk about the schools of thought of psychology. But we often overlook happiness in our thesis projects, in our research projects. Mine especially are usually sad. I'm known as the one who has the most depressing thesis students because they're all like, why do people hate themselves? Or why did childhood abuse happen? And everybody else is kind of like, if I were to have sex every day, would I be better off or not? And then mine's like, depression kills. You know, it's true, is it not, Dr. Henniger?
Yeah, no, it is true. Well, because I think it is the case that, we think about, so counseling, right? It's like, oh, that's who you go to when you need help, when there's something wrong. But also there's the striving for your best life and trying to seek the positive. That's something that we always joke about too, the difference between me and Dr. Bergen, where we're both social psychologists, but I'm more interested in negative emotions like envy and jealousy and shame that you feel with other people, whereas he is a positive psychologist also, kind of more interested in the good emotions like gratitude and those kinds of things. So yeah, it is interesting.
It's important that we remember that counselors, that's my stripe of this field. We were invented to help healthy people stay healthy. We were invented for primary intervention strategies, right? To help people who were already doing well continue to do well. And it wasn't until maybe the past 20 years-ish that we moved into this, the movement of the medical model. We got kind of medicine envy, and we're like, we're medical professionals too. And then, so we started treating the disorders. But a counselor's true purpose is to help people who are doing well continue to be doing well, and then reach your better self. That's the goal. But then again, what's my research agenda? Burnout and suicide. So there you go.
Makes me think about, in the video we had a couple of weeks ago where 80% of people just complain all the time. Nobody gets together and goes, I'm super happy and I want to tell you why I'm happy.
And if they do, we maybe don't like that person so much, right? Like, why are you rubbing it in?
Yeah. Why are you so bubbly?
Go away.
Yeah. No one likes you. Evidently, Elaine, where does this research come from?
It came
PositivePsychology.com.
Yes.
Are they our unofficial sponsor of the day?
Unofficial sponsor. When you're
so
psychology,
the opinions reflected, the opinions reflected here today may come from PositivePsychology.com, or they may come from Psychthoughts. Whichever one makes you mad is the one that came from the other. And whichever one you like, that comes right here from Psychthoughts. According to the notes that Elaine gave us, she keeps us on track, some more behind the faculty curtain, there are two aspects, and here we go, of happiness. One is hedonia, which is pleasure. I'm more familiar with anhedonia, so the absence of pleasure. I feel really close to you right now, Nicole. Like this is, we're really linked in these negative emotions in this moment. And then there's eudaimonia. No, eudaimonia, sorry. A sense that a life has been, a life has been well lived. I don't know, your wife may live well too. Mine does, but a life well lived. I've got to just turn it over. I'm struggling to even speak right now. Someone else. Dr. Henniger.
So I'm not familiar with either of those terms, but I am familiar with the idea of kind of splitting apart the idea of, so there's sort of pleasure in the moment and kind of what you're experiencing in that moment versus sort of looking back and kind of having this bird's eye view of your life and feeling satisfied, kind of life satisfaction. And so Daniel Kahneman, who is known for behavioral economics, he's a psychologist, Kahneman Tversky. Oh, there's a cat. There's a cat. Wait, sorry. There's a cat. Okay.
If you're playing along at home, the quote of the day was cat.
Kahneman Tversky identified, so Kahneman has been focusing on kind of the idea that, well, what is actually more important? Is it more important to seek out experiencing happiness, so that hedonia, the pleasure part of it, or is it more important to seek out that sense of a good life? And how often do you really think on how good your life is and that remembering self? So if you think about, like a vacation, right? We often make decisions based on what we think our remembering self will like. So like, oh, I'm sure that I would like to go to Disney World, right? And so you have this idealized picture, but then when you actually get there and it's hot and there's lots of lines and there's screaming kids. And so in the moment, you're maybe not experiencing pleasure, but then kind of some time passes, you get home, and then your remembering self takes back over and is like, oh, that was great. I was in the happiest place on earth. And so it really is a difference of, are we making decisions based on what our experiencing self would enjoy, or based on what our remembering self would look back on and enjoy? And those might be two different things, or they can coincide.
Our remembering self is actually pretty good at looking back towards the positive direction. We see this with childbirth. Absolutely. Childbirth, our brains are pretty good at forgetting peak experiences of pain. We have an understanding of pain, but we diminish what it really was like pretty quickly. And I had one professor, and I will point out, so we're not doing some mansplaining here, she was a she professor, right? And she said, there's no way that we would have another one if we remembered what the first one was like. And I was like, there's no way I'd have one, because I've seen it happen. And it freaked me out a lot. So there's this concept, our brain does default. Yet when we get stuck in a pattern of maybe like a depressive pattern or an anxious pattern, we then start hyper-focusing on those negative moments, and we filter out the positives rather than filtering out the negatives, and we set this cycle in motion. So we think about that life well lived as maybe a gratitude list type intervention of daily appreciation. Doug, you look deep in thought. It's beautiful.
I was just, I kind of think, do you think that puts you in a bad state if you kind of think about your life and everything? Because I've always come from the school of thought that happiness comes from within. Okay. Like she was talking in her example, you have this memory, I'm going to go to Disney, it's the happiest place on earth. But yet to Derrick, it's not. And so he had a bad experience and all these other things. But to me, it seems like a lot of people put happiness in other things, money, relationships, all this stuff. And those things tend to let us down or fail us. And so we're not as happy as we should be. And so I'm a big component because, when we talk about happiness in class, I go, positive psychology, they're here to tell you about what to make you happy. And I know you're all thinking, this is great. This is just, I'm going to buy into this. And then I tell you everything that's not going to make you happy. And you're like, well, I don't like that.
Yeah.
We don't like the concept that, money's going to make you happy. Everybody always has that, well, 3 million make me happy. And, I remember Mark Cuban, when the lottery got to $1 billion one time, he said, if you was a miserable individual, you're going to be a miserable rich individual, because if you can't find enjoyment from within with yourself, I don't think you can find that happiness, because
you're looking for those things to make us happy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
They did a study looking at lottery winners and found that, right, that immediately they were happy, and then their life went about back to the same. And same thing if something awful happens, right? So they in that same study, they looked at people who were in accidents and became quadriplegics or paraplegics. And so there's a drop and there's a change in what you can do in your life. But sort of over time, it gets back to being about the same level of happiness, sort of the satisfaction with life, at least. There is
And,
some
isn't that how it is with regression to the mean, right? It doesn't matter which side of the mean we fall to, we always regress back. And that life satisfaction survey, on a scale of 1 to 10, people report about a 7.2, right? And this is where they tend to stay in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And it's always around somewhat happy. You're relatively satisfied with your life. We continue this regression. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, we call that the hedonic treadmill, where it's sort of like, you keep running and running and running towards these goals, and you think that the next thing is what's going to make you happy. It's like, oh, when I graduate college, then I'll be happy, right? I will have done my achievement. And it does make you happy for a bit. And then you go back down, and then you're running and running after the next thing. So your first job, like, once I get a job, then I'll be happy. Or once I finish my graduate degree, then I'll be happy. And it does make you happy for a bit. And the same thing with bad things, right? So either way, we're sort of running and running and running, and we're never going anywhere. But also maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, because the idea of positivity is that it draws you towards it. It's a reward for doing good things, and it helps you keep doing good things. But if you were always in a super positive state, you just wouldn't do anything anymore because you wouldn't have that incentive.
If you'd like to know more about why being in a strong positive state all the time is detrimental, there's a class that's taught at Tennessee Tech every fall called psychopharmacology, and we'll talk about how staying in an altered state of positivity is actually detrimental to your physical and mental health. And then you can be mad at me all day long. If you're a medical professional out there, you don't want to take that class because you're not going to be a fan, I promise.
The second day you're not happy.
Yeah, no, you are not going to be.
You're not. The happiness is pushed out of you.
It's hard to tell people exactly what you said, Dr. Henniger, that if you got that raise, or if you get that degree, or if you have that child, or if you get married, it's hard to tell them that that's going to be fleeting because they don't believe it.
Yeah, and we're not set up to, right? Like, we need to chase each of those things, but it is. And then you can almost feel disappointed afterwards of, like, I thought that this is going to be the thing that made my life whatever. So how do we actually pursue happiness then if it's not going to be our accomplishments or each of these peak experiences?
If that didn't sound like a segue, nothing will.
The next section on Elaine's notes.
That's professional right there. I don't care.
I'm getting the hang of this thing. I'm going to be a permanent guest.
You've been dragging us along the whole time. So let's go to Seligman. Why not? Martin Seligman, do you believe the story of why he founded positive psychology? Are all three of us aware of the kind of the Todd story about? Okay, so he was studying something, the dogs.
Learned helplessness? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he was studying learned helplessness, where he put dogs in a chamber that when they jumped from one side of the chamber to another, they would receive an electrical stimulation and then an auditory nuisance, right? So a loud alarm and some shocking. And the dogs would jump back and forth, and every time they were receiving a punishment until they just gave up, right? There were also these dogs that were put in crates, and food would be left outside the crate. And if they tried to get outside the crate, they would receive a negative stimulus, right? Eventually, he could have the dogs in a taped box, and they would lay there starving and not achieving food because of learned helplessness. And that's like, it's banana sad. I don't know who you. I don't know who you are.
But this is hard.
Yeah, some of you out there are like pretty dramatic, and you're like, "That's my life." Man, maybe you should watch Psychthoughts a little more. Like, let's go outside together. We'll talk. It'll be good. But evidently, the story goes, Martin's daughter asked him what he did for a living, and he couldn't bear to tell her. So he started studying positive psychology.
I believe it, though. That's
Well, I believe that it'd be horrendous to tell your kid, "Oh, don't worry, Daddy just kills puppies."
Right.
It's fine.
Didn't
It's
kill
all
them.
in
He
the
just
name of
shocked
science.
them.
Shocked them and made them starve. And if you're still listening and you're with PETA, you probably hate us. You should know that we're not him. And I mean,
but also sorry to all
might
animal
be.
researchers out there. Like, you do important research. It's important.
Excellent research that we need. I did have a student once, and I'll complain about this for 1 second. 80% is complaining, right? The section was, why do we do animal research? And I simply said in class, there are some things that we need to know that, quite frankly, we don't need to subject humans to. And she raised her hand, and I called on her mistakenly. And she said, animals are people too. And I mean, I almost walked out. I didn't know what to do because we're too far away to have a conversation at that point. So I'm pretty sure she still hates me. But
and you think about it every night, right?
I do think about it a lot. A list of things that I've heard that I wish I would have never heard.
So did you answer her back and go, so are you saying that I can test horrendous stuff on people now? I can break people's spines and do testing?
I would like to make a nomination for the IRB committee. We'll get a lot more things through with her in charge. We can either do this to people or we're going to have to do it to cats. And they're like, oh, people, please. I love cats. Thorndike didn't like cats.
Why put them in a box?
Cats like being in boxes. It's fine.
At least the cat's
I can't lie. I've never heard of the PERMA model. It's not something that I'm familiar with. It sounds fake.
I had a senior thesis student when I taught at Knox College who did a study with the PERMA model, and she was looking at gender differences and across cultures. She was from Ghana, and so she was doing this really interesting, like she took research at home or took data at home and then in the US. But so I didn't know anything about it though until she brought it to me, and then I quickly forgot about it again. So I relearned it now.
So PERMA, an acronym, PERMA. Let's start with the P. Positive emotions is a defining psychological well-being. So what are some positive emotions that maybe Dr. Bergen would be able to enlighten us about? What would he say are the positive emotions?
I'm a negative emotion researcher. We're like, there's happiness.
Happy, joy.
There's
feel happy.
There's feel good.
Elated.
I like
An array
that.
of negative emotions that have detail and distinction and
I
gratitude,
think positive emotions.
awe, admiration.
Gratitude.
As if when Nicole said gratitude, it wasn't good enough. Thanks, Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear her.
It's fine. It's fine.
Oh, gratitude is one of them.
Thank you, Nicole.
E in PERMA is for engagement. What do we mean by engagement?
Well, that's what Nicole was, and then she got married.
There's one
So
ring
engagement, what we're talking about is there's an extra ring there now. We saw it happen on Zoom. Engagement is about being connected to what's going on rather than being distant from what's going on. In industrial organizational psychology, they really give us engagement type research. If you've ever been in corporate America and your corporation gives a survey, and it's an engagement survey, you're going to want to score pretty high on that survey so that you can keep your job. That's going to be important. So you have actively engaged, then you have disengaged, and actively disengaged. The people who are actively disengaged focus on the negatives. You've worked with them. You're probably thinking of them right now. Just don't say it out loud. That'll be fine. But these are people who really suck the life out of a ship, right? It's not a fun experience to be around. They don't like to laugh. They like to focus on how bad everything is. Our culture loves this person right now because they get on Twitter and they're going to change the world one tweet at a time, which is phenomenal to me. So engagement, being involved or feeling connected to some type of process. And I'll tell you, whether you're working at McDonald's or you're working in the White House, being engaged in your organization will contribute absolutely to your well-being. in that you feel a part of something, a little bit of that fulfillment. So in the PERMA, we've made it to the R, the relationships. Relationships, I think, are something our students are starting to take for granted. What do you guys think?
Take for granted? Like how?
In that we get kind of stuck in our old ways. Doug, when you walk into a general psychology classroom full of 250 students, how much chatter is there and how much texting is there?
Well, there's a lot of texting. I mean, there's just, I mean, I see what you mean. There's a little bit of withdrawal, but I think we finally got to the point where we got what we always wanted, this electronic digital communication. And now everybody's like, I wish I could talk to somebody or hug somebody, you know. I think that we finally got what we wanted and we're like, this sucks, you know. I think we'll have a lot more of, you know, relationships now. I think people really, you know, I was talking to some colleagues and we was doing stuff and they go, I really hate Zoom now. I mean, there's a thing out now called Zoom burnout where people are tired of just doing this because you miss that interaction. And I think that
Why don't they call it Zoom out? Zoom out would be such a great name for that.
It would be. Zoom out.
There'd be a symbol for it. We'd put it in the DSM. Oh, that'd be exciting.
Someday.
Do you talk to strangers? Doug, I know your answer. The answer for Doug is yes. Doug will talk to a dead stranger. Doug will go to a funeral and bend over the casket and be like, it's kind of cold in here. What do you think? And they'll just continue to talk about being dead. I don't understand it. Elaine, what about you? Do you talk to strangers?
Nope.
No.
Not unless you have candy.
If you have candy in a van, I'm getting in. What about you, Nicole? Do you talk to strangers?
It actually depends where I am. So, like when I was home in Missouri, I would, or in Illinois, like Midwest, you'd be in the grocery store, you're in the same aisle, and like, oh yeah, toilet paper, huh? I'm like, oh yeah, toilet paper. But then I moved to California, and people there did not talk to each other in the store. Like they're friendly, they're chill, they're laid back, but they don't chit chat very much. And so then I got used to that. Now, I'll smile at people, but I usually won't strike up a conversation.
So research is coming out. It's been consistently coming out that we don't like to hear that when we engage with someone simply by talking to them about toilet paper, about the weather, all those idle conversations, not only do you have a positive response from that, but they have a positive response from that as well. I wish I could remember the city, and if I was doing good prep work for a psychology talk show, I probably would. But they did a mass transit. There was a train, and they had this a study that was set up where they were told not to talk to each other. Don't talk, and they would measure levels of happiness for the people who were riding this train every day. And then they set up what they called a bar car, where everybody was encouraged to talk. So the trains where they were encouraged not to talk were like no talking zones, silent zones. And these bar cars, people were encouraged to speak with each other and do these different types of things. Well, this transit authority got rid of all the bar cars, and the researchers, when they were studying this, said, why? Why did you do that? And they said, oh, they were too full. No one was in the other cars. They all were doing this. And because that's what we crave, isn't it? We crave that interaction. There's a fun game that you can buy off the internet, and it's called the rejection game. And it encourages you to socially interact. And your goal is to get rejected every day. So you're at Publix or you're at Kroger, and they're ringing stuff up, and you look at the cashier and you say, hey, can I get a discount on any of these things today? And if they say no, you won. That you got rejected for the day. That's awesome. But I had a patient who was dealing with social anxiety disorder. So I often will have them play the rejection game as an exposure treatment. And he comes into session and he says, it's really hard for people to say no. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty fun, right? So people had given him money. He had gotten a ride to somewhere he didn't need to go and got a ride back. And he said, I thought I was gonna fail. I didn't think I was gonna get a rejection. I said, well, what did you do? He went to Walmart, walked into an aisle and just said, Marco, thinking if no one said polo, he would get rejected. Somebody said polo, and they went and had dinner.
Oh my God.
We crave interaction. There's a Doug at every corner, right? If you smile at people, you're going to meet a Doug.
If I pass you twice at the grocery store, I'll speak to you the second time. So.
If he passes you a third time, run. Run as quickly as you can.
I'll start asking you about your stuff in your buggy. So I see you bought marshmallows.
So relationships, those minimal interactions are vitally important. Pull your head out of your rectum and talk to people. It will be okay because you need it and they need it. What's the number one complaint of college students? Every university success center knows this. Number one complaint of college students, what is it? Loneliness.
Yes.
Yet they're in a constant community with each other. How many times have we went into a classroom full of students and they haven't turned the lights on yet? It makes my heart break.
I love that.
I shame them. Yeah, I use shame therapy there. I'm like, you guys suck at life. You change your majors. Because it's what we need, relationship. And if you're out there and you think you don't need relationship, I'm sorry that you've been hurt so badly, but you won't overcome the power or the need for that relationship. In the 2 minutes and 41 seconds we have, I know, Elaine, let's finish this. We have to find a way to make meaning out of our lives. How do we make meaning out of our lives? What do you got for us, Dr. Henniger?
I don't know.
I fell asleep during that long dissertation you gave.
Thanks, Doug.
How
do we make meaning?
Search for meaning. That's a deep question.
Higher purpose.
I think a lot of people, it comes back to relationships, right? Like you find meaning in what can you do for other people? How can you you can find meaning also in accomplishment or in, things that you do individually, but I think people find it more meaningful when it's something that contributes to something that will last beyond them.
In IO psychology, they talk about satisfaction versus satisfactoriness. And satisfactoriness, are you capable of doing a job? So if maybe you have like crazy math skills, you're phenomenal when it comes to numbers, and so your whole life they told you needed to be an engineer, so you've got a lot of satisfactoriness for that. But if you don't want that, if that doesn't fulfill you, then you won't find any satisfaction from that line of work. So finding meaning is about finding satisfaction, and often that sense of purpose.
It alludes back to his universal strengths. We talk about them in intro. You have a certain strength and you should tie that into whatever your vocation is. That would make you happy because you're working for the betterment of yourself and society.
The last one of these out of the PERMA model is accomplishment. And I think we could say setting small goals that you can achieve, but that cause you to stretch a little bit. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, not too easy and not too difficult, somewhere that pushes you, and then recognize those accomplishments. When you're little, it might be tying your shoes or going poop on your own. And when you're older, it might be a degree, but searching for something more. What we have here is maybe a plan for happiness. It's less than a minute. This is Psych Thoughts. We hope you enjoy what you're watching. If you don't like what you're watching, keep watching and send it to other people. Make them miserable as well. If you've laughed once, we've tried to help you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share our videos. I'm Derrick. That's Doug. This is Dr. Henniger and our intern, Elaine. We'll see you next week.
Bye.